They met at an airport during a delayed flight. They had only 5 minutes, but in those minutes, they told each other more truth than they had told anyone in years. One conversation, one note slipped into a pocket. Miles of distance, and a connection stronger than space. This is a story about a love born between takeoffs. About choosing honesty. About the courage to arrive forever. The plane takes off, but the story doesn't.
Love Stories Max. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy watching, friends.
5 minutes between takeoffs. I don't like airports. They always smell like goodbyes, paper cup coffee, and other people's lives rushing past. That day, the flight was delayed by 40 minutes, and I stood by the window, watching rain draw uneven lines on the glass. My suitcase had a scratch on the corner, a memory from a previous trip. I traced it with my finger, as if it could calm me. That's when someone quietly said, "Sorry, may I stand here? You can see the planes better from this angle. When they're angry." I smiled without turning right away. You think they get angry? Absolutely. When they're delayed, they grumble just like people. I looked at him. Jake. I didn't know his name yet, but I noticed his eyes, warm, a little tired, like someone who hadn't allowed himself to stop in a long time. He wore a simple jacket, dusty sneakers, and a backpack that looked like it had seen more of the world than most people in the terminal. "I'm Charlotte," I said, too quickly, as if we already knew each other. "Jake," he replied. "I've got 5 minutes before boarding." I glanced at the screen. So did I. 5 minutes. "Where are you flying?" he asked. "To a place where everything starts over," I answered more honestly than I meant to. "And you?" "Running away from a place where nothing holds me anymore." We laughed, softly, carefully, like people afraid of scaring the moment away. I told him I was flying for a new job because my old life had become too tight, like shoes a size too small. That I was afraid of lonely evenings in a foreign city. That sometimes I wake up at night thinking, what if I'm doing everything wrong? He said he once wanted to be a musician, but life decided otherwise. That he knew how to stay silent for years, yet today, for some reason, he wanted to talk. That he was afraid of becoming someone who never dared. People passed us, rolling suitcases. Announcements echoed through the hall, but the space between us felt strangely quiet. As if the airport had given us a pause meant only for two. "You know," Jake said, looking not at me but somewhere beside me, "sometimes a few minutes are enough to realize you can be real with this person." "Yes," I whispered, "and that's exactly what's terrifying." The boarding announcement cut us off, sharp, almost cruel. "His flight first, Charlotte." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't know what to do with this. But I'm glad these 5 minutes happened." I nodded, feeling something warm and aching bloom in my chest. "Me too." We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. We just looked at each other for one more second, as if trying to remember not the face, but the feeling. He walked away. I watched until the crowd swallowed him whole. My plane took off later. I sat by the window, watching the ground shrink. Somewhere in the sky, maybe, another plane was flying. With Jake on it. And that's when I understood. Stories don't always begin with "and they lived happily ever after." Sometimes they begin with 5 minutes of truth in an airport. The plane takes off, but the story doesn't, because now I know. Somewhere in the world, there is a person to whom I told everything that mattered in 5 minutes. And that knowledge is enough to not be afraid of starting over. Even if our flights are headed in different directions. I thought it was over. That those 5 minutes would stay inside me like the smell of an airport on a scarf, lingering for a bit, then fading. But when we finally did hug, quickly, awkwardly, as if afraid to allow ourselves more, his hand brushed my coat pocket. I noticed it on the plane. Sitting by the window, seatbelt tight across my chest, I absent-mindedly slipped my hand into my pocket. My fingers touched something thin. A small folded piece of paper. Simple, still warm, as if it held the heat of his palm. Written in handwriting, Jake, an address, a city, and a tiny uneven plus sign at the bottom, like he wasn't sure. I read those few lines again and again as the plane climbed higher. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone in the sky. I didn't write right away. For 2 days, I carried the note in my pocket, taking it out in cafes, on the subway, at home before bed. It felt like once I wrote, something would change forever. Eventually, I sent a short message. "This is Charlotte. 5 minutes at the airport. I don't know if you were waiting. But I remember." The reply came 3 hours later. "I was waiting. And I'm glad you wrote." That's how our in-between began. Between cities. Between time zones. Between workdays and dreams. We wrote late into the night. About little things. How we drink our coffee. What songs we listen to in our headphones. What the sky looks like from our windows. He sent photos of his mornings, sunlight sliding across the sill. I sent pictures of my evenings, tea, blankets, quiet. We called each other without warning. And sometimes said nothing at all. That mattered more than words. He knew when I was anxious. I spoke faster. I knew when he was sad. He joked more than usual. One night he said, "I leave the kitchen light on when I talk to you. Like you're here." I saved that sentence like a charm. Months passed. The distance stopped being abstract. It hurt. Especially in the evenings, when I wanted to just sit next to him. Touch his shoulder. Hear him breathe, not through a phone. "Come," he said quietly one day. "Not to visit." To me, I stared at the screen. Then at the suitcase in the corner. The same one. With the same scratch. "Forever?" I asked. "Forever, if you're ready." I arrived in the rain. He stood on the platform without a jacket, soaked, smiling, real. When he hugged me, I knew. These were different arms. Not goodbye arms, but your home arms. We unpacked slowly. He asked where to hang my dress. I laughed and said, "Somewhere it won't get lost." That evening, we shared 1 cup of tea and watched the city quiet down outside the window. Before bed, I found the note again in my coat pocket. Creased, soft, I kept it, I said. He smiled. I hoped you would. And then I understood. Sometimes a tiny piece of paper is enough to change the direction of an entire life. The plane once took off. But the story landed. And stayed. The first morning, I woke up before Jake. The apartment was quiet. Only the kitchen clock ticking, as if checking whether I was really here. I lay still, listening to his breathing. Afraid to move. Afraid it might all vanish like airport noise. I got up carefully, barefoot on the cold but honest floor. I made coffee, strong, the way he liked it. 2 cups, even though I didn't know where everything was yet. I liked being a little lost in his space. He appeared in the doorway, sleepy, hair a mess. You didn't disappear, he said. I promised, I smiled. We learned each other again. Not like at a distance, where you can hide exhaustion or bad moods. Here, everything was real. My quiet mornings. His habit of thinking out loud while pacing. I left notes on the table. Don't forget to eat. He slipped lucky coins into my pockets. Sometimes we argued, softly, unsure, over small things, dishes, weekend plans. But even then, he didn't let go of my hand. As if afraid I'd turn back into distance. One evening, we sat on the floor, backs against the couch. The lights were low, rain tapping the window. The same kind as the day we met. Do you remember the airport? He asked. I remember everything, I said. Even how you kept twisting your backpack strap. He laughed. I was afraid I'd never see you again. And I was afraid that if I did, life would never be the same. We fell quiet, but it was a warm silence. Time passed. The city became mine. His roots, ours. We had a cafe where the barista knew our orders. A park bench where we talked about the future like it had already agreed with us. One day I found the note in his desk drawer. He'd kept a copy, carefully smoothed. Why? I asked. Because that's where it all started, he said. And I don't want to forget how easy it is to lose a miracle. That night, I rested my head on his shoulder and understood. Love isn't only big moments. It's knowing where the batteries are kept. It's someone pulling a blanket over you when you didn't ask. It's your name sounding like home in a foreign city. I came to him forever. But that wasn't the real miracle. The real miracle is that once, in a noisy airport, 2 strangers weren't afraid to tell the truth in 5 minutes. And now those 5 minutes last a lifetime. This story isn't really about an airport. And it isn't about distance. It's about the courage to be honest when you only have a few minutes. We often postpone the truth for later, when it feels safer, easier, more convenient. We learn to live halfway, speak in half sentences, feel with half a heart. We're afraid that if we say everything, we might lose. But silence takes more from us than risk ever does. Charlotte and Jake met in a place designed for goodbyes. And instead of hiding behind polite small talk, they chose sincerity. 5 minutes of truth turned out to be stronger than years of familiar conversations with others. Love doesn't always grow from long acquaintance. Sometimes it appears the moment 2 people allow themselves to be vulnerable, without guarantees, without promises, without certainty about tomorrow. This story is also about distance, not as an obstacle, but as a test. Real feelings don't disappear in the quiet between calls. They grow in patience, in waiting, in small acts of care. A light left on in the kitchen, a saved note, a voice that slowly becomes home. And it's a story about choice. About not running from fear, but stepping toward it. About not leaving feelings in the past, but letting them change the direction of your life. Sometimes, forever begins with a single step into the unknown, a suitcase, and a trembling heart. The moral is both simple and hard. When your heart suddenly recognizes another heart, don't stay silent. Even if you only have 5 minutes. Because sometimes those 5 minutes last a lifetime.